Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're zooming in on a massive real-world template for social policy. We are traveling all the way to Brazil to lock in the final 10th row of our global policy matrix. We've been mapping out how different jurisdictions are gearing up for a potential post-labor future, and this final piece of the puzzle, well, it takes us to the exact place where modern social policy kind of got its start. Just take a second to wrap your head around this staggering number: 46 million. Today, Brazil's flagship social program, known as Bolsa Familia, reaches roughly 46 million people. To put that into perspective, that's about a quarter of the entire country's population receiving direct support. So we're not talking about some small-scale pilot program or a theoretical white paper here. This is a massive, incredibly tested, and deeply embedded system of poverty relief. Okay, let's dive into this, because the sheer scale of global influence this single Brazilian policy has achieved over the last 20 years is just mind-blowing. Back in 2003, President Lula consolidated a few earlier schemes into what we now know as Bolsa Familia. Now, it wasn't the very first program of its kind in Latin America, but it absolutely blew up to become the largest and the most influential. In fact, the idea spread like wildfire. More than 40 countries now run programs modeled directly on this exact template. We're talking dozens of international delegations literally flying in just to study how Brazil pulled this off. To really grasp why this framework is so heavily copied across the globe, we have to look at its core bet. The source text actually summarizes it perfectly, stating, "Targeted, conditional cash, delivered through a democracy, can relieve poverty now and break its cycle." That right there is the fundamental promise. The goal is to solve the immediate, crushing hardship of today, while simultaneously securing a much better, far more stable future for tomorrow. Section 1. The conditional bargain. So the key terminology you need to know here is CCT, which stands for Conditional Cash Transfer. And the whole mechanism is right there in the name. Basically, a family living in poverty receives a modest monthly payment, but, and this is a big but, only while they meet some very strict conditions. Namely, they have to keep their kids enrolled and attending school, and they have to take them in for regular health checkups and vaccinations. So you can think of it like this: cash is given in one hand, while a strict condition is held firmly in the other. Now, the explicit target of a CCT is something called intergenerational poverty. This is that vicious cycle where the very poor stay very poor, specifically because their kids just can't access the education or health resources they need to escape it. The whole idea behind Brazil's approach is deceptively simple, but honestly, it's quietly radical. The strategy isn't just to relieve poverty today. It's to pay families to actively invest in their children so the next generation can climb out of poverty for good. And this brilliantly illustrates the two-sided deal right at the heart of the program. On one side, the state gives. They target the payment using the Cara Único, which is this massive, unified registry of low-income families, and they're increasingly delivering that cash through Pix, a lightning-fast instant payment rail. But on the other side, the family commits. They commit to consistent school attendance, keeping vaccinations entirely up to date, and making those clinic visits. So immediate financial relief is directly paired with long-term human capital investment. Section 2, the delivery puzzle. Which brings us to another incredible statistic: 93%. That is the percentage of Brazilian adults who now use Pix. I mean, if you've ever found yourself waiting 3 business days for a simple bank transfer to clear, prepare to be a little jealous. Pix is the central bank's free instant payment rail. It settles in seconds, it's widely used by everyday informal merchants, and crucially, it reaches folks who were previously completely unbanked. Because of Pix, the state can zap cash transfers directly into people's pockets with just unprecedented speed and efficiency. If you recall our previous breakdown of India, you're going to see a really fascinating dynamic play out here. India's major contribution to global social policy was all about the rails. The cheap, incredibly scalable digital plumbing designed to deliver anything to anyone. Brazil's contribution, on the other hand, is the payment model itself. It's the actual logic of what to pay, exactly who to pay, and under what conditions. So India built the pipes, and Brazil designed what flows through them. Between the two of them, these global South democracies hold the two critical halves of the delivery puzzle that the rest of the rich world is currently scrambling to study. Section 3. Mapping the levers. Now, what's really interesting here is how strikingly identical Brazil's matrix looks compared to India's. It's a very thin but broad approach. For instance, the income floor is partial.
Now, it's definitely the most developed cash floor in the global south, backed by things like the BPC benefit for the elderly and disabled, but it still remains targeted and pretty modest. Work and time? Also partial, balancing strict formal labor codes against a massive informal sector. Skills and transition is partial as well, heavily driven by those school attendance conditions we talked about. And institutions are partial, featuring massive innovations like the Kadunico registry and that PIX rail, even though modern guardrails for AI and workers are still pretty nascent. As our sources are quick to point out, landing on the exact same pattern as India isn't just a fluke, it is a major, undeniable finding. Think about it. Two massive developing democracies tackling the massive problem of poverty completely independently, and they converged on the exact same answer. Do a little bit of everything, try to reach almost everyone, and absolutely lead with the thing you can actually afford.
Section 4. The Honest Read. Let's take an honest, impartial look at the limits and trade-offs of this model exactly as outlined in our sources. First off, despite the program's massive success, Brazil remains a deeply unequal society. A targeted floor absolutely relieves the worst, most crushing poverty, but it doesn't magically rewrite the fundamental economic structure of who ends up where. Second, those conditions we talked about, they have a double edge. The families who are least able to keep a child in a distant school or make a clinic appointment are sometimes the absolute poorest of the poor, which means the most vulnerable can actually fall off the rolls. This fuels an ongoing debate. Is attaching strings to basic survival empowering, or is it paternalistic? And finally, there are hard fiscal caps. Things like a heavy pension burden and commodity dependence really limit just how far this floor can be scaled up.
Beyond that, while the human capital payoff of keeping kids healthy and in school is totally genuine, the data shows that the effect sizes are, well, modest. They aren't entirely transformative. Careful studies do find that children raised under these specific conditions perform better than their older siblings who weren't, but the results are very measured. And because of this, combined with the massive administrative headache of actually tracking all these conditions, there's an increasing debate right now about whether the ultimate logical destination of all this should just be a fully unconditional transfer.
Section 5. The Ladder Problem. Let's move to and see how this builds into the most profound dilemma facing this policy today. Here is the impeccable, traditional logic of the conditional model. Step 1. Provide immediate cash relief. Step 2. Educate the children. Step 3. Those educated children grow up and secure the good jobs their parents simply couldn't get. It's like a perfectly constructed ladder of opportunity. But, and this is the million-dollar question, what happens if that ladder gets shorter? Seriously, what happens if automation and advanced AI fundamentally rewire the labor market before this current generation of kids even arrives? This perfectly captures the existential tension sitting right at the heart of the whole program. What happens to a brilliantly educated cohort if the rungs they were trained for have been removed? All of this conditionality assumes that a steady ladder of jobs is just waiting for them at the top. The entire logic of investing heavily in human capital basically collapses if the human work it's training them for just disappears. Navigating a post-labor transition is, essentially, figuring out what to do when those rungs start vanishing. And with that slightly sobering thought, I'm thrilled to say our map is finally complete. Brazil represents row 10. We have now officially mapped all 10 jurisdictions and filled out every single cell across the 5 levers of our matrix. The stage is entirely set for us to step back and look at the whole menu of options the world has created. So the crucial takeaway from Brazil's incredible achievement is this one lingering, provocative thought. A transfer designed to move people toward work is really only as good as the work waiting for them. As we prepare to read across our fully assembled matrix next time, we have to ask ourselves, are we building a ladder to nowhere? Keep that question in the back of your mind, and I will see you next time as we finally analyze the completed global map.